hey, I just came downstairs and saw that it was raining, and so I was inspired to talk a little bit about the symbolic nature of the world. And what I mean by that is that if we look at the world through the lens of Advaita Vedanta or through the lens of objective idealism, then the things, the objects, the events, the happenings around us can be seen symbolically, right? The actual forms, the shapes, the content that we perceive, that they're recognized symbolically as opposed to independently having their own form. Right, a good example is a dream. So in a dream, let's say there's something happening in your life where you want to take another course, right? Or you want to look at things in a different way. Then one of the ways that may appear in a dream is you may be driving and then you may take an off-ramp, right? Unexpectedly, you may take an off-ramp, or you may just veer off the main course onto another course. So the movie itself in that dream is that of a driver and a car, and there's asphalt, and there's a detour, and all of these things are physicalized in the dream. And they're symbolic representations of that mind which is experiencing or starting to realize its course veering off to the side, taking another course. That's just one example. Dreams, of course, can take many meanings, but the example there serves to mirror what is happening in this environment, in this what we call the waking state, from the perspective of Advaita Vedanta and objective idealism. And I want to talk about that a little bit, the perspectives of Advaita Vedanta and objective idealism. I mention them only because many times when we participate in conversations like this, or when we hear discussions like this, then it's almost as if it's a different realm or a different field of understanding than what we're usually used to, which is the materialist perspective, the materialist philosophical perspective, which says that the physical world is primary and the mental world or consciousness is secondary, and it's derived from physicality. And in fact, what we are talking about here is not something different or incompatible with what the mainstream culture thinks or with what scientific culture thinks. And it's not something different because it's simply the same data, the same events, the same happenings reframed, right? Seen from a different perspective. And so it's not fundamentally incompatible, it's simply a different way of looking at things. Specifically, one that places experience, what each of us knows most fundamentally, first. So do we place experience first and then the things that we experience in the context of that, or do we place things that are experienced as though they're independent of us first, which is the perspective of the world out there being real, independent of us? So these are two different ways to look at things. I would suggest that the perspective of looking at our own consciousness first, and then questioning whether this consciousness is in fact my own, a personal thing, or whether it simply appears as an experience of personality, right? Going down that perspective, which Advaita Vedanta and objective idealism both support, that leads to new discoveries, and discoveries that are not in the mainstream culture. and possibilities that are not considered generally possible. So that was my detour for this conversation. That's important to understand whenever you hear any kinds of conversations like this, that this is fully compatible with everything that we know. It simply recontextualizes it, and in my opinion, gives it more power. In the case of the symbolic world, so this rain, for example, I came down and I heard it raining. And wow, rain is such a beautiful thing. It has this percussion to it, this drum. I'm hearing it right now. It has this drum, this percussion to it, and if we allow it, it can kind of wash us out, right? Because what is rain? What is the earth doing when it rains? It's the water that is in the environment that has condensed as clouds, that is then being released, right? And pouring upon the earth. So, metaphorically, which is what the world is, right? Metaphor. When I say metaphorically, I don't mean just as a way of thinking about it. I'm using the word metaphorically as one might typically use the word literally. Because if the world is metaphor, then this is literally a metaphor, right? And you will have to choose where that fits for you, where that works for you, on the range of literal, metaphor. What is the meaning that that word has for you? So the world, metaphorically, literally, is that symbolic representation of what is happening as mind. And for the human being, the thoughts, the emotions, the interpretations, all of this stuff that is in our environment, meaning in the mental space, all of that gets aggregated and condensed, and it can start pouring out, which is this washing out effect that can happen when it rains. And as one dives into their bodies, through the physical, into that mental space, into the energetic configuration, into the non-local informational domain, and then finally as awareness itself, as consciousness itself, then as these avenues open up, then when it rains through you, right? The rain itself is washing everything out. People feel this. So the time of rain can be a time of cleansing of the bodies. And by cleansing, I don't mean so much cleaning, I mean clearing out, right? You can feel things washing out, like the rivers are streaming through us. It can be a time of deep reflection, because as things clear out, the vision also becomes clear, right? The lens through which we see the world and through which we divide the subject and the object, through which we divide me and you and me, here and there, now and then, all of these poles, it starts to become clear. And the fulcrum at the center of those divisions, right? The prism which refracts in either direction as that subject and object, as me and you, or as the original light and the reflected light. This prism itself is seen in a sense. And so all this is possible as the bodies are cleared out, and rain is symbolic of that event. And so we can experience that with the rain. So let me take you outside then. Let's see. Oh, I don't know how to flip this. I'll just turn around here. brain.